May 5th, 1977, 10:30 p.m. The 596 Club, 10th Avenue, Hell's Kitchen. Charles Ruby Stein walked into the bar thinking he was meeting a business partner. Ruby was New York's biggest independent loan shark. He'd lent out millions. He knew everyone. He feared no one. Danny Grillo met him at the door with a smile. Then he shot him in the face. As Ruby collapsed, two more men fired rounds into his body. They dragged the corpse into the bathroom. Jimmy Coonan pulled out a jagged kitchen knife and began cutting. First the head, then the arms, then the legs. He wrapped each piece in plastic and dumped them in the Hudson River. Ruby Stein disappeared. No body was ever recovered. The message was clear. Hell's Kitchen had new management. This wasn't just another mob killing. This was the moment the Westies announced they were done playing second fiddle to anyone. Not the Italian Mafia, not the old Irish bosses. Nobody. Jimmy Coonan and Mickey Featherstone ran the bloodiest gang in New York through pure terror. They dismembered bodies. They shot people in crowded bars. They allied with the Gambino family not because they had to, but because it was good for business. The Italians had the structure, the Irish had the violence. Together, they owned Manhattan's West Side. This is the story of how a crew of Irish psychopaths from Hell's Kitchen became so dangerous that the most powerful mafia family in America made them partners instead of enemies. From brutal gang wars to FBI wiretaps, from dismemberment techniques learned from Roy DeMeo to the RICO trial that destroyed them all. This is the rise and bloody fall of the Westies. But here's what nobody tells you. These guys almost won. They controlled unions, construction, the piers, and they did it with a fraction of the manpower the Italians had. And they might still be in business if one of their own hadn't been framed for a murder he didn't commit. Hell's Kitchen in the 1970s was a war zone. Tenement buildings with broken windows, bars on every corner. Longshoremen, construction workers, thieves, and killers all drinking in the same dive bars. The neighborhood sat on Manhattan's West Side between 34th Street and 59th Street. The Hudson River docks were dying. The unions were corrupt, and the Irish mob had run these streets since the 1800s. By 1975, one man controlled it all, Mickey Spillane. Spillane was old school, 43 years old, married into the prestigious McManus family who'd run the Midtown Democratic Club since 1905. He wasn't flashy. He sent flowers to neighbors in the hospital. He gave turkeys to families at Thanksgiving. But he also ran bookmaking, loan sharking, and the most audacious racket of all, kidnapping. He'd snatch local businessmen and rival mobsters, hold them for ransom, pistol whip them, then let them go when they paid. It was bold, it was profitable, and it pissed off everyone. Spillane's real power came from unions. His marriage gave him political connections. That meant union jobs, construction at Madison Square Garden, service work at the Coliseum, and the big prize, the Jacob K. Javits Convention Center, under construction on the West Side. Spillane controlled who worked, who got contracts, who got paid. The Italian Mafia wanted in. Spillane told them no, this was his neighborhood. The Italians could take their business elsewhere. But there was a problem. A young psychopath named Jimmy Coonan wanted Spillane dead, and he'd been trying to kill him since he was 18 years old. James Coonan was born December 21st, 1946, in Hell's Kitchen. His father was an accountant for mobsters. Jimmy grew up around crime. He saw how things worked. Who had power? Who got respect? Who got rich? When Jimmy was 18, Spillane kidnapped his father over some dispute. Spillane slapped the old man around, humiliated him, then told him to control his son. Jimmy never forgot. In 1966, Coonan grabbed a machine gun, climbed to the roof of a tenement building, and opened fire on Spillane and his crew. He didn't hit anyone, but Spillane got the message. This kid was dangerous. Spillane went back to Coonan's father, slapped him again, and threatened the whole family. Jimmy was arrested soon after for murder and kidnapping. He pleaded it down to manslaughter. He did 5 years. He got out in 1971, and he immediately went back to war. While Coonan was in prison, he'd made connections. Tough guys, killers, men who were tired of Spillane's old-fashioned rules. When Jimmy got out, he started building his own crew. Mickey Featherstone, Billy Beatty, Eddie Comiskey. These weren't businessmen, they were lunatics. Featherstone had lied about his age to join the Green Berets at 17. He served in Vietnam. He came back with severe PTSD. He'd been in and out of mental hospitals. He'd been found not guilty of murder by reason of insanity after shooting a man outside a bar. He heard voices. He had hallucinations. He was also completely loyal to Coonan. That made him valuable. Coonan's strategy was simple: out-violence everyone. Spillane was a gentleman gangster. Jimmy was a savage. In 1976, the war escalated. The Genovese crime family wanted the Javits Convention Center. They made a deal with Coonan. If Jimmy became boss, the Genovese would get construction contracts and give Coonan a cut. To make that happen, Spillane's top men had to die. The Genovese hired a freelance hitman from Buffalo, Joseph Mad Dog Sullivan. Mad Dog Sullivan was a professional, cold, efficient, no loyalty to anyone except money. The Genovese gave him 3 targets: Tom Devaney, Eddie the Butcher, Comiskey. Tom the Greek Capatis, all Spillane's top gunmen. On August 20th, 1976, Eddie Comiskey walked into the Sunbright Bar on 10th Avenue. Someone shot him multiple times. He died on the floor. 4 months later, Tom Devaney was shot and killed. Then, in January 1977, Tom Capatis was murdered. Spillane's crew was being systematically eliminated. Spillane knew he was next. He moved his family out of Hell's Kitchen to Woodside, Queens. But it didn't matter. Coonan had already made a deal with Roy DeMeo. Roy DeMeo was a Gambino family soldier. He ran a crew in Brooklyn that specialized in murder. They'd perfected a method: lure the victim to the Gemini Lounge, shoot them in the head as they walk in, drag the body to the bathroom, bleed it out in the tub, dismember it with knives and a saw, wrap the pieces in plastic, dump them in different locations. No body meant no murder case. DeMeo's crew killed over 70 people this way, maybe more. Nobody knows the exact count. DeMeo met Coonan after the Ruby Stein murder. Coonan had killed Stein, a major loan shark, and cut him up just like DeMeo's crew would. DeMeo was impressed. These Irish guys were serious. DeMeo had been looking for a connection in Manhattan. Coonan needed help taking out Spillane. They made a deal. DeMeo would kill Spillane. In return, Coonan's crew could work with the Gambinos. Partnership, not subjugation. On August 5th, 1977, Mickey Spillane walked to his car outside his apartment in Woodside. Someone shot him 5 times. He died instantly. He was 43 years old. The official story said DeMeo pulled the trigger as a favor to Coonan. Mickey Featherstone was arrested for the murder. He was acquitted. No one talked. No one testified. And just like that, Jimmy Coonan was the undisputed boss of Hell's Kitchen. Now the real business began. Coonan formalized the alliance with the Gambinos. His main contact was Roy DeMeo. Later, after DeMeo was murdered in 1983, Coonan worked directly with Gambino capo Daniel Marino. And after Paul Castellano was murdered in December 1985 and John Gotti became boss, Coonan's liaison was Joe Watts. The arrangement was simple. The Westies controlled Hell's Kitchen. Loan sharking, gambling, extortion, labor racketeering, drug dealing. They kicked a percentage to the Gambinos. In exchange, they got protection and legitimacy. When the Gambinos needed someone killed, they called the Westies. The Irish crew became the Gambino family's contract killer squad. The money flowed. Union shakedowns at the Javits Convention Center brought in hundreds of thousands, construction rackets, pier jobs, cocaine distribution on the Upper East Side, loan sharking at 20% interest per week. The Westies only had 15 core members and maybe 100 associates, but they acted like they had an army. That's because they had a reputation. Cross them and you disappeared. Literally. The Westies learned dismemberment from Roy DeMeo. Jimmy Coonan refined it. He'd kill someone in a bar or apartment. Then he'd drag the body into a bathroom or back room. He'd use a kitchen knife, a meat cleaver, sometimes a saw. He'd cut off the head first, then the hands to prevent fingerprint identification, then the arms and legs. Each piece went into plastic garbage bags, then into the Hudson River or sometimes the East River. The currents carried the pieces out to sea. Bodies were rarely recovered. Without a body, prosecutors couldn't prove murder. It was practical. It was effective. It was horrifying. In January 1978, the Westies murdered Richard Tassiello. Coonan, Featherstone, and another member named Tony Lucich killed him, then dismembered the body. In 1979, they killed Harold Whitehead, a bartender. Coonan and Featherstone were tried for that murder. One witness killed himself. Another refused to testify. They were acquitted in December 1979. The pattern repeated. Witnesses died. Witnesses disappeared. Witnesses refused to talk. The Westies operated with impunity. Mickey Featherstone was Coonan's right hand. Born September 2nd, 1948, in Hell's Kitchen. Blonde hair. Baby face. He looked harmless. He wasn't. By 1976, he was Coonan's enforcer. If Jimmy wanted someone dead, Mickey did it. If someone owed money, Mickey collected. He was fearless. He was brutal. But he had a code. He killed people, but he refused to cut them up. At Billy Beattie's trial, Beattie testified, "I'll kill anybody, but I'm not into cutting them up." That was Featherstone's line, too. They had limits. Coonan didn't. The Westies ran Hell's Kitchen for 10 years. But alliances with the Mafia always come with complications. Featherstone started to resent the Gambino connection. He saw it as a betrayal. The Irish had fought for independence from the Italians for decades. Now Coonan was taking orders from Brooklyn. Featherstone didn't like it. Tensions grew. Coonan and Featherstone had a falling out. That crack in the armor would eventually destroy them both. In 1986, everything fell apart. It started with a murder Mickey Featherstone didn't commit. On April 25, 1985, a construction worker named Michael Holley was shot and killed outside the Javits Convention Center. Holley had gotten into a dispute with Kevin Kelly, another Westies member. Kelly wanted him dead. On that April night, someone walked up to Holley and shot him. Witnesses said the shooter had blonde hair. Mickey Featherstone had blonde hair. He was arrested. He was charged with Holley's murder. Featherstone insisted he was innocent. He said he wasn't even there. He had an alibi. But the Westies closed ranks. Kevin Kelly, who prosecutors believe actually ordered the hit, let Featherstone take the fall. Billy Bocoon, another Westies member, may have been the actual shooter, but nobody talked. In March 1986, Mickey Featherstone was convicted of Michael Holley's murder. He was sentenced to 25 years in prison. Featherstone sat in his cell and realized the truth. His own crew had framed him. Coonan didn't protect him. Kelly threw him under the bus. The Westies, the gang he'd killed for, the men he'd gone to war for, had betrayed him. He made a decision. If they were going to bury him, he'd bury them first. He reached out to prosecutors. He had an offer they couldn't refuse. Mickey Featherstone became a cooperating witness. His wife, Sissy, helped. She wore a wire. She recorded conversations with gang members. She gathered evidence. The district attorney's office investigated Featherstone's claims. In September 1986, Judge Alvin Schlesinger overturned Featherstone's conviction. Post-conviction investigation proved he was innocent. He was released, and then he started talking. Featherstone gave prosecutors everything: names, dates, murder locations, dismemberment techniques, loan sharking operations, extortion schemes, Gambino connections. He detailed how the Westies operated, how they controlled unions, how they moved cocaine, how they killed at least 30 people, maybe more. He connected the dots between the Westies and the Gambino family. He implicated Kevin Kelly, Billy Boken, and most importantly, Jimmy Coonan. On March 26, 1987, United States Attorney Rudolph Giuliani held a press conference. Standing next to Manhattan District Attorney Robert Morgenthau, Giuliani announced a devastating RICO indictment against 10 members of the Westies. The charges included 8 murders, dozens of attempted murders, kidnapping, loan sharking, extortion, gambling, and drug trafficking. The defendants included Jimmy Coonan, Kevin Kelly, Billy Boken, James McElroy, and Edna Coonan, Jimmy's wife. Giuliani called them one of the most savage organizations in the long history of New York gangs. He wasn't exaggerating. The trial began in September 1987. It lasted 4 months. Mickey Featherstone testified in open court for 4 weeks. He walked the jury through murder after murder. He described how Coonan dismembered Ruby Stein, how they killed Harold Whitehead, how Kevin Kelly shot Michael Holley, how the Westies worked as contract killers for John Gotti and the Gambino family. He was calm, detailed, credible. The defense tried to discredit him. They said he was insane. They pointed to his PTSD, his mental hospital stays, his history of violence. But Featherstone's testimony was corroborated by wiretaps, by other witnesses, by physical evidence. The jury believed him. On February 24, 1988, the verdicts came down. Guilty. Jimmy Coonan was convicted on racketeering charges. He was sentenced to 75 years in prison. James McElroy got 60 years. Kevin Kelly got 50 years. Billy Boken was convicted. Richard Muggsy Ritter got 40 years on loan sharking and drug charges. Even Edna Coonan, Jimmy's wife, was convicted for her role in passing messages while Jimmy was in prison. She served time, too. The Westies were finished. But the ripple effects went further. Featherstone's testimony also implicated the Gambino family. He testified that John Gotti had used the Westies for contract killings. He detailed how Joe Watts served as Gotti's liaison to the Irish gang. He explained the arrangement. The Gambinos provided protection and legitimacy. The Westies provided violence. Featherstone's cooperation gave federal prosecutors ammunition against Gotti himself. It wasn't the only evidence against Gotti, but it added to the growing case. By 1992, Gotti was convicted under RICO and sentenced to life in prison. The Westies helped bring down the most powerful mob boss in America. Mickey Featherstone was released in December 1988. He received 5 years probation due to his cooperation. He and his wife entered the Federal Witness Protection Program. They were relocated under new names. Mickey Featherstone, the baby-faced killer who'd murdered at least a dozen people, disappeared into suburban America. He's 77 years old now. He's probably still alive. And he's still protected. To this day, nobody knows where he is. Jimmy Coonan is still in prison. He's 78 years old. He's serving his 75-year sentence at Lewisburg Federal Penitentiary in Pennsylvania. His mandatory release date was originally set for June 2025, but appeals have complicated that. He's lost multiple appeals. His wife, Edna, is 82 now. She served her time and was released. She's tried to get Jimmy out on compassionate release. So far, it hasn't worked. He'll likely die in prison. Kevin Kelly, the man who likely ordered Michael Holley's murder and let Featherstone take the fall, is also still incarcerated. James McElroy died in prison in 2011. He was serving his 60-year sentence when he passed away. Billy Boken was released in 2001 after serving 13 years. Most of the other Westies are dead or in prison. The gang effectively ceased to exist after 1988. Hell's Kitchen itself changed. By the early 1990s, the old Irish working-class demographic was disappearing. Gentrification moved in. Real estate prices climbed. Yuppies replaced longshoremen. Coffee shops replaced dive bars. The blue-collar neighborhood that had bred generations of Irish gangsters was gone. Today, Hell's Kitchen is expensive, safe, and sanitized. The Westies are a memory, but their story remains a brutal reminder of what happens when violence becomes currency. Here's what the Westies story reveals about organized crime. Violence alone isn't enough. The Westies were the most feared gang in New York. They dismembered bodies. They killed without hesitation. They terrorized an entire neighborhood, but they couldn't sustain it. Because violence without structure is just chaos. The Italian Mafia had codes, hierarchies, rules. The Westies had loyalty and fear. When loyalty cracked, as it did with Featherstone, the whole operation collapsed. The RICO statute destroyed them. Passed in 1970, the Racketeer-Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act allowed prosecutors to charge entire criminal enterprises, not just individual crimes. Giuliani used RICO to dismantle the 5 families of New York. He used it to destroy the Westies. RICO meant that being part of a criminal organization was itself a crime. It didn't matter if you personally pulled the trigger. If you were part of the enterprise, you were guilty. That's why Edna Coonan went to prison just for passing messages. That's why Coonan got 75 years even though he wasn't charged with every murder. The Westies also revealed the danger of cooperation. For decades, the Code of Silence protected organized crime. Omerta. You don't talk. You do your time. You never cooperate. But Mickey Featherstone broke that code. And when he did, he took down an entire organization. Coonan probably never imagined his right-hand man would flip. He thought loyalty was absolute. He was wrong, and that miscalculation cost him his freedom. There's a broader lesson here, too. The Westies were Irish. The Gambinos were Italian. The alliance worked because both sides got something valuable. The Italians got muscle and deniability. The Irish got legitimacy and protection. But ethnic crime organizations eventually fragment. Resentment builds. Featherstone resented the Gambino connection. He saw it as selling out. That resentment festered. When he was betrayed, it exploded. The alliance that made the Westies powerful also contained the seeds of their destruction. The Westies ran Manhattan's West Side for 2 decades. They controlled unions, construction, the piers, and the streets. They were so violent the Gambino family made them partners instead of going to war. They dismembered dozens of bodies. They killed with impunity. But in the end, they were destroyed by the same thing that made them dangerous, their willingness to do anything. When Mickey Featherstone realized his crew would sacrifice him to save themselves, he used that same ruthlessness against them. He destroyed them all, and he walked away. If you found this story fascinating, hit subscribe. We drop a new mob documentary every week. Drop a comment. What untold mafia story should we cover next? The Westies are gone. But the streets they walked, the bars where they killed, the river where they dumped bodies, those places still exist. Hell's Kitchen is clean now, but the ghosts are still there. You just have to know where to look